a lot of interesting questions and conversations are coming to the surface now, especially with Xbox raising its prices. Now, prices usually would level out, but this is a unique situation where I think what people are seeing is how these companies have the ability to control, a market. And one thing that I've said is, and I've recommended, is that if you game on PC, you can pretty much sidestep a lot of this stuff. Think about it. Nintendo raises its prices, PlayStation follows in other regions. I mean, people are making it seem like Xbox followed Nintendo, but it was PlayStation that followed Nintendo first on the hardware. Xbox came in and went full blast, hardware and possibly later down the road, software. Game development costs are going insane. This is as a result of these two, PlayStation and Xbox, competing in inordinate ways, going nuts and losing their minds. Other publishers out there going crazy as well, trying to farm the most in terms of profits and forgetting that video games are just supposed to be fun. The biggest and the bestest graphics, yeah, is not paramount to a gamer's enjoyment. However, now that the conversation has come up, I'm seeing some people question why they are on console. And this happens all the time whenever there's like a shift or a change or whatever it is. And with Xbox actually trying to make the console obsolete, I say this is probably the best time to start making inquiries and doing your research to possibly move your gaming to PC as the generation turns around, or even now, before the generation turns around, if you are so inclined or interested. A simple proposition. Now, there are some caveats here, but we're going to go ahead and talk about why these caveats have continued to even make PC gaming much more attractive. For instance, shout out to Nikola Vrzinovic, I think that's how you say it, 940. You say, guys, and this is on the videos about PC gaming and some of the pricing, you forget how greedy NVIDIA is. Even with current prices of Xbox consoles, it's nothing compared to NVIDIA. Very well noted. Very well noted. NVIDIA is a crappy company when it comes to their own customer proposition. But you know what? There are two things that I have to point out in this video. Number one, NVIDIA is not the only player in the market. In fact, more recently, another player came into the market and tried to do something disruptive. And I think their eyes on disruption because they're getting pummeled on the GPU, on not just the GPU side, they're getting pummeled overall. It's just what it is. And that is Intel, right? So now, by the special grace of God, in the market, we have one more player that wants to compete. So not only are we going to be sitting here and wondering, what is NVIDIA and AMD going to do? We now have a new player in the game who's an old player in the game as well, and that is Intel. So if these guys decide that they are not going to give you the value proposition that you want, because for some reason they are the most overhyped company I've ever seen in my life, right? These ones, Team Red, are deciding that they will probably try their best to do a good job. Now, they do okay, which we saw with their 9070 launch, which was somewhat of a regular launch and somewhat of a paper launch, but they showed some streaks of hunger. Team Blue Intel is also here to hook you up. Now, their GPUs that came out recently with the B5 series, B580 and such, I think that's what the name was, it had some shortcomings. However, it still came into the market with $250 at the 1440p price point. Something at the 1440p performance level, something that even these guys themselves had not even tried. They've tried it and done it at a $300 price point and are trying to run away from it because they want to farm more money from you. And that will be the RTX 3060. They've since pretended like they don't know what that GPU is. These guys, on the other hand, they do it all day at the $300 price point as well. If you're patient enough to allow for the whatever, they put on top to go away. Something like the 6750 XT, that's been a $300 GPU at many points, 305, 315, 320. And so you have options. I'm not even talking about the used market. You have options. I get it. The second thing is, on the PC side, generations don't really matter. Do you know why? Majority of gamers around the world would be, enjoy keeping their money. And this affects the market and the way things work. Let me show you something very interesting, because this is not something that a lot of people actually talk about in this perspective. The last time I saw people talk about the Steam hardware survey, They were console warring with it, which is a very big mistake, right? So let's check out the Steam hardware survey, and let me show you the secret sauce inside of the survey. I show this all the time. The Steam hardware survey shows the most used hardware that gamers use. Steam sends a survey every year. If you're on PC, they'll ask you, hey man, can you run this script real quick? And with your permission, can we get your hardware? All you click is yes, and it will just grab all your hardware SKU. Because your hardware SKUs are actually like, you know, on the operating system level, they show up here. So for instance, like here, mine, it will show you my CPU, it will show you my GPU, it will show you how much memory and RAM I'm using. I don't even know where they pulled the data from. I'm thinking it's something that has to do with the process within Windows that shows all that stuff. I know you can't see it here because my screen is kind of weird. But here it shows you everything that, this PC is running in terms of under the hood and so on and so forth, right? You can see it over here if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And so when they take this hardware data and they do the survey, they're able to see, do you know what's been noticed in this hardware survey? Some of the most used GPUs, right? Anything from the 2% mark upwards is where developers are actually targeting almost all their games. I can show you. I've shown this before. Let's go. Elder Scrolls 6 Oblivion Remastered. Unreal Engine 5. You need a 2060. You need a 1070 Ti, which, if you look at the Steam hardware survey, you have a 1060. You also have a 1650, which is a huge portion of gamers. Generations don't really exist here because your GPU is a piece of hardware that should be able to run video games and render graphics. So developers are not doing anything necessarily crazy and new, except for all this nonsense that AMD and NVIDIA, especially NVIDIA, has planted into their processes, like ray tracing and reflections and all these other things. And they're like, well, your GPU can't support that. And gamers are like, screw you. We just want to play the game. We don't care about supporting it. This is why you notice that even here, the GTX 1060 and the 1650, which are in the older families, are very popular. And that doesn't negate like some other, interesting mentions, like the 1070, the RX 580, the 38, the 30, that I'm not even going to 30 series. That's actually way too new. The 1660, right? The 5700 XT, the 1650 Ti's, the laptops, the 1080 Ti's, which are actually interesting and very, very important mentions, which can all do better than the 1070 that this developer is asking for a newly released game. We go to Monster Hunter Wilds. Let's look at one that, actually broke the internet and see what they're asking from a hardware perspective. They want you to use an RX 5500 XT GPU or a GTX 1660. The developers know that if they make their games where they're demanding a lot of this performance that a lot of gamers on PC don't have, their game's not going to sell. This is what shoots NVIDIA and AMD in the greedy foot whenever they try to mess around. The developers have to answer to the market. With these two things alone, do you hear what I mean? With these two things alone, the PC market maintains a unique position. And that's it. The fact that there are multiple players and the fact that there are gamers who are not yet willing to give up their old hardware. Some, financially just find it ridiculous because gamers are not only on PC, are not only in the West where, the GDP, disposable income and such is slightly higher. And so, yeah, people can buy, new GPUs and new CPUs from time to time. But in some cases, some people have to basically, save up significant amounts of money to get themselves some hardware. And hardware ends up being, somewhat of what we'll call old hardware. But developers, all they see is a potential customer. Developers don't care about your hardware. They don't have to worry about your hardware. You have to market your hardware. That's NVIDIA and AMD and Intel's job. The developer just has to make the game. And so they need to sell their software. And they need to find the most viable place to sell their software. And for now, the most viable place to sell their software is where the gamers are. Hope this makes sense. Thanks for watching. Peace out.